With 4 hit films, 2 spin-offs, and several projects inspired by, John Wick has done way better than expected when they released the first one back in 2014. If you're like me, you've consumed all the tangential, Wick-inspired works, and you might be looking for something new, something different. And that's what this video is for, because I have something I think scratches a very similar itch, but in a new way for fans of John Wick. Let's do this. Okay, internet, when I did a video like this earlier this year about Invincible, I settled on doing a comic book series, and not to give it away, but I am suggesting another one here. Partially because I feel like most movie watchers clicking on this video will be familiar with the movies that feel like they have come out of the wake of John Wick's success, and partially because I just want to talk comics. So if you clicked to hear about Atomic Blonde or Nobody, I'm sorry to say that you've come to the wrong place. I will gladly plug a video I did a couple years ago, because that touches on all that stuff in the movie realm, and I think it mostly stands up. Before we get into suggestions, let's just break down what makes John Wick. The main and most obvious thing to mention is, of course, the action. As its main selling point, the action in these films are extremely cool and well done. They are flashy, fluid, and highlight the skills of Keanu and the stunt performers. These extended scenes are not only violent and hard-hitting, but extremely clearly shot and easy to follow. The series' iconography is built off of this for a reason. They stood out from the overly tight, overly edited shaky cam action sequences that were far too common at the time. Not to say that shaky cam can't be good, because like all techniques, it has great and poor execution. Just that for a while, post-Bourne movies really got dragged down by poor imitators. That is why the first John Wick felt so fresh at the time, and why even though the movies that have been made because of the popularity of John Wick aren't as good, I do think, for the most part, the franchise raised the bar on action movies visually, both in clarity and in style. Speaking of style, John Wick has plenty of that. Beautifully framed, high contrast images, and tons of color. I think that's one of the things that draws so many people in with these films, that they throw away the idea of gritty realism and desaturated palettes, instead delivering something much more expressionistic. This both lets the image pop, delivering something more striking and memorable, but also uses the image to tell the story. In the first film, from the opening scene until John goes to the Continental and returns to a life of violence, the film is bathed in a cold blue. It is like a Michael Mann wet dream. More importantly, it signifies the sadness in him surrounding the death of his wife. That fades when he gets to the Continental and he is putting himself on the path of vengeance. Having a goal he is working towards gives his life a meaning. And just as a note, there are other scenes that aren't blue leading up to that moment, but they have important relevance as well, such as when he gets the dog and when the gangsters attack his house. Blues never leave the palette of the franchise because John never escapes his sadness, but while he is on his path, it is not all-consuming. God, I love excellent uses of color in film like this. The John Wick films, at their core, are about grief and revenge, all stemming back to the first film and the death of his wife and the killing of his dog. So while the world gets bigger and bigger, and filled with alliances and double crosses, all of that is a ripple effect from the original point. But speaking of that, let's talk about that sweet, sweet world building. In the first John Wick, they established the Continental, a neutral grounds within the crime world, as well as the gold coins, a universal currency within the underworld. Elements that give the movie a sense of scale existing beyond just the plot at hand, while never being explained beyond what is needed, mostly through context clues, not only keying us in on the fact that these characters are in the know and don't need the exposition themselves, but also adds an air of intrigue to the world. On top of that, the use of gold coins feels like a relic of the past lingering, telling the audience that whatever is tying the crime world together goes back further than just the lifetimes of the characters we see on screen, as long as you ignore the Continental show. As the films go on, they build more and more layers into this lore while keeping that mysterious, unexplained, old world obscured to the audience, besides what is needed to advance the plot. And while it can feel very convoluted at times, I do think part of the fun is in rolling with it and being introduced to the ideas like the high table or the adjudicator, knowing we won't fully learn all the details. So while the lore of John Wick can be obtuse, I do love it. We've seen in major franchises like Star Wars spend decades filling in every hole in their lore with expanded universe, now legends, and now we're getting parts of the audience freak out over retcons that makes me really appreciate the more abstract, piecemeal method of world building that we're seeing here. Just quickly wanted to say, if you're enjoying the video, please like and subscribe because it helps the channel out. And if you have the means and are feeling a little extra generous, you could even become a channel member for just a few dollars a month. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Let's get an obvious out of the way. I am not recommending Berserker, the comic created by Keanu Reeves. Despite his involvement and the way the character is clearly modeled after him, I don't think it scratches the same itch. Berserker is a fantastical series, and while Wick may be a killing machine who can just keep pushing himself, that is not the same as the immortal B from this series. I honestly wouldn't feel the need to bring it up at all if it weren't for the Keanu connection, but it is there, so I gotta. Also, there is a John Wick comic miniseries, and obviously that is out too. That would be like recommending Rogue One to a Star Wars fan. It is a bit different, but it's still the thing. Not to be confused with John Carpenter's The Thing. There is one comic book series that I think perfectly lines up with everything I've mentioned in a way that also feels wholly itself, and that is 100 Bullets by Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Rizzo. The initial premise is simple. Short story arcs about characters whose lives have been ruined and their shot at revenge. These characters are visited by Agent Graves, a mysterious figure who gives them proof and information on those who wronged them, as well as a gun and 100 untraceable bullets. They can do whatever they want with that. So like John Wick, the series begins as a revenge tale with an implied larger world. Also like the Wick movies, 100 Bullets grows over the course of its 100 issue run. And while the comic series, I would say, gives more answers by the end of it than John Wick does, it still paints a world of shadowy mystery and is okay with leaving questions unanswered without it feeling unsatisfactory. They are companions in terms of their world building above all else in my eyes. That said, there are other similarities. 100 Bullets has a great visual language to it that really pops. Not just in its fantastic action sequences, but in dialogue as well. There is a scene in a later volume that I won't spoil, but it is bouncing between two conversations happening simultaneously in a large park. Okay, quick correction, it's actually in A Foregone Tomorrow, which is the 4th volume, which means it's in the front half, not a later volume, like I misspoke and misremembered, or whatever you want to call it in the earlier recording. I just want to get that out there. It's the front half. Please don't yell at me, nerds. The two are weaved together by a kid skateboarding around the park, leading us back and forth between the two. It is such a brilliantly fluid way of executing a scene like this, and it's just one of the many examples of how the series uses motion and layout to tell a very dense story very clearly. I think it is worth saying how both the movie series and comics that I'm talking about tackle their early vengeance story. We are so keyed into John Wick's arc because of how innocent that puppy is. Nobody wants to see an animal die like that in general, but adding to the fact that the dog was left for him by his dead wife to help him cope with her passing is even worse. The dead wife trope is well worn in this kind of story, but this twist on it gives us a fresh enough take that it doesn't feel as cliche as it would have if it was just his wife that was murdered. Similarly, the first protagonist of 100 Bullets, Dizzy, is avenging the death of her husband and child. While playing on the trope of a gangbanger out of jail looking for revenge, Dizzy being a woman and grieving mother helps turn the story into a new direction. That is one of the big moves of 100 Bullets, taking the cliches of crime and noir fiction and building them into part of a larger whole. While some pieces can feel a bit more two-dimensional and less subversive, they are all part of what I think is a brilliant tapestry when it all comes together. 100 Bullets is a fantastic read, one of my big obsessions as a comic book fan. I read it last year and I'm already excited to read it again. The more and more of it I read, the more I was connecting the parallels between it and the John Wick movies I adore, so I'm glad I got to yap about it for a while. Now I just need an excuse to talk about Criminal. I really do recommend that you check out 100 Bullets. It is just such a fantastic piece of writing. One of my favorite crime comics, one of my favorite comics. All in all, it is just so much fun. If you are familiar with it, leave your thoughts on it down below. And until next time, have a good one.